let's dive right in. We're going to go into the last portion of how to serve as a project team member, which is part 3, the closure phase. And recapping where we've been. If you haven't had the map by now, you can download it in the bottom right. But we've gone through the planning forest, hitting all of those key activities there, through the execution mountain, hitting all of those activities, and now we're on to the home stretch to take care of lessons learned, the stakeholder survey, final report, celebration, and a sign off with sponsor. Now, we're not going to get in depth on all of these because most of these, they're really not going to involve the project team very much. We're really just going to focus on the lessons learned and the celebration. But I still want you to know what's going on behind the scenes so you have an idea of what project closure looks like, what your PM and what other people are having to deal with while you're just working on the other two. So that's going to be half our session because we don't have a lot to cover in closure. The other half is really going to be, it's going to be a big breakout activity where you guys are going to go into breakouts for roughly 20 minutes and really just talk about how you can apply this to your, how you can take this back and actually start using it. Actually make something effective. Again, take the theory and turn it into something you can actually work with. So diving right in, getting into closure, here's the activities I want to walk you guys through. The project management side, they all, people on the PM track, they're getting a checklist of closure activities to go through. And I'm just going to kind of run you guys through those so you have a quick high level view of that. And like I said, we'll just go into 2 of them. So part of closure, and not necessarily in any certain order. They're conducting lessons learned meetings, which is one thing that we will go into. Super, super valuable. And I think it's even if you're not doing projects, I think doing lessons learned is something that's really, really healthy for your team. And I'll get into more of that later. But basically just taking a look at the project and how can we, continuous improvement, how can we do better? Where were pain points and how can we fix those for next time? Then we're diving into the really exciting thing of indexing and archiving project documentation. Super boring, be happy you're not doing it. They're just taking all that stuff in the file repository and whatever else comes out of that and just kind of finalizing it and putting it away in a file drawer, basically. Going into assisting the project team with conducting evaluation. Typically, this is like a survey or evaluation of the stakeholders, or depending on your approach, it might be just working through a requirements list and just checking off, yes, we did this, was everything to the quality that it needed to be, etc. That might involve you, but it's pretty simple. Did we do what we were supposed to do? They'll have a final meeting with the project sponsor to bring that list to the project sponsor and have the project sponsor say, yes, you achieved the objectives. This project was successful. Like this formalized handshake, the formalized sign off, it's another thing that seems kind of like unnecessarily formal. I'm not a very formal dude. I don't like adding more work that doesn't really have a real purpose. But this one is small, but it keeps your sponsor accountable so that they can't come back 2 months later and be like, what about this? Imagine some of you have had to deal with that. I definitely have had to deal with that where I had years-long, a multi-year long project, got it all done, but we didn't do a sign-off. And then 3 months later, the sponsor said, what about this one feature? And it was a key feature, but it was like, this wasn't part of the scope. We never talked about this. And and then we had to rush to get it done just because that's what we were stuck with. So having a formal sign off keeps your sponsor accountable from not doing that. And then if they do ask you that, you can say, no, you agreed that we were done. If you want to do this, we can add it on as a second project, but we did what we said we were going to do and you agreed with us. So it's small, but it's big too. I just saw somebody raise their hand. If you want to jump in, just dive right in. I think we'll have a little bit of time for questions. I don't know who it was because you lowered your hand already. But if you're not talking, I'm going to keep moving. They're going to do a final report. So the project manager will create the final report. Oh, a thumbs up. All right, Paul. Thanks. The project manager will create a final report, some sort of PowerPoint, and they'll use that to conduct a project closeout meeting. You'll almost definitely be invited to this meeting. You'll probably be asked to contribute to it. But it's kind of one of those flexible things, and we're not going to dive into it. It really depends on your project. But they'll typically, say, it's kind of like a recap of the kickoff meeting where here's what we set out to do, here's why we were setting out to do it. And then they'll get into here's what we did, the fact that we did do what we were saying we're going to do. They might share the successes of the project, the pain points. They might share the lessons learned, but really just a snapshot of the whole process and kind of like just signing off on the whole thing, letting all the stakeholders know that we did it, we're done. So the sponsor's not the only one that knows it was done. Everybody knows that we're done. Then we'll go into celebration, and that's another thing that we will go into more detail on for you guys. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is like the formal, you're done working on this, celebrate. Now, this item is something that's on, as a project management office, this is on our checklist. And if you're working in a similar capacity where you're completing projects on behalf of others, you might do this too, which is basically just a customer survey of like, how did we do? We managed your project, we did your project for you, what'd you think? So it's not about the project, it's about you guys and how you worked and, you know, the value that you added when doing that project. So that one you may or may not even bother with. And then last two are more if necessary items, which is handing over project ownership. So again, if you're doing a project for somebody else and it's something that needs to operationalize, they'll conduct that handoff to them, training the owners, handing over documentation, whatever it takes to do that, and then settling payments, closing out contracts, things like that. This is all of the stuff that happens in closure pretty much. Like I said, we're just going to go into two, starting with the lessons learned. And I'm going to say right now, let me bring back my gallery view, if I can remember how to do it. Just a show of hands, how many of you guys are conducting lessons learned as a regular part of your work? Not necessarily projects. They also call them postmortems. I kind of like that term. It's a little morbid. A little bit. Okay. So I hope I can learn you something because I think it's, I've been on project teams for a long time that didn't do it. And then I've been on, we instituted this on my old team years ago. Before we were doing anything else project management related, we started doing lessons learned and postmortems. And I can't say how healthy it is for your team. If you do it well, you will have a healthier team. You're going to have better work. It's just a good thing to do. Even if you don't do anything project management related, this is a good process. I think it's a very good process. There's a project manager video out there that this is one of those things, if you heard me talk about earlier, where I'm not a fan of writing down the documentation just so you can file it away and never look at it again. There is a document that comes out of this that's part of the process, but it's not about it's not about having the document. It's about the process of creating that document and the growth that comes out of that. So I want you to look at this quote, which is what we learn becomes a part of who we are. We do this on every project. We do a lessons learned after the project has pretty much wrapped up. The point of this is to reflect on a project, or if it's a large project, you could do this on each phase, and that's what I'd recommend. So that, you know, if you learn lessons at the beginning of a full year-long project, you don't want to wait until the end of the year to actually recognize those lessons. You want to learn them immediately, incorporate them into the project. So if you have long projects, do this regularly. Maybe after each milestone, maybe after each phase, that kind of thing. But the point is to reflect on the project or phase, and then identify how to make improvements for next time. It's meant to be a safe space where all feedback's accepted. And this is one of the parts where I say it becomes a healthy thing. When your team is used to having that healthy and supportive environment where people can make mistakes, we can point out things that could have been done better, we can point out failures. It's not about playing the blame game, but it's just about like, how do we avoid that next time? How do we do better? And it can get extremely nitpicky, and that's fine as long as the environment is correct. So I worked in broadcast work, and I don't know anybody that's ever worked in broadcast and live events. Most of us engineers and analysts are picky, like literally down to the second. If a graphic showed 2 seconds later or two seconds earlier than it showed up, we're going to complain about it. And that's okay. So the lessons learned should be able to support that. And you should be able to say, I noticed this was done 2 seconds later than it should have been done. You know, why did that happen? And it might be that it's just somebody forgot and they pushed the button 2 seconds too later. It might be a full communication problem where somebody didn't realize that and somebody had to shout it across the room, hey, hit that button. But the point is that you can get super nitpicky because we're trying for perfection. But again, supportive, positive, solutions-oriented, never blame game. Once your team gets used to this, and probably the first few times you do this, it might be a little quiet. People might be a little defensive depending on your teams and how well they work together and how well they know each other. But as you work this in, it just becomes natural. And this is where I say it's so healthy, is because people start to get that psychological safety of knowing that they can just strive for perfection, and then also they can try new things. So maybe we did try something, we did a lessons learned, we found out it was done poorly or what have you. But the point is that people feel like they can do that, and that also people feel like they can improve, and that they're not scared of making mistakes. Obviously, we don't want mistakes, but they shouldn't be scared of it. So ultimately, the goal is to improve the quality, the value, the workflow, the speed of completion, the cost efficiency, and team synergy of the project. I think that's the only time I'm going to say synergy today, so let's keep it to one time. And I saw a question in there that I do want to answer, which was, Danny, yeah, do you recommend it being a meeting or an anonymous survey? So I'm going to talk you through a process. There are different ways to do it. And you know, I'll cover that on the next slide. Just don't let me forget to answer your question. So we're going to talk about it as a meeting primarily, but what you can do as a team member, you come to that meeting thinking about two key questions, which is what worked well and where can we improve? Because we want to celebrate things too. If somebody tried something new, we want to celebrate if it worked well and how cool that was. Like, we want to celebrate people's successes, but we also want to improve wherever we can. Again, future focused, buzzwords, future focused, solutions oriented. And if something didn't go well, just suggesting a way to improve it for next time. And this is an open thing. It's not this team member talked and then the PM answered. It is a full forum. Everybody has a voice there. One person can recognize a problem, the other person can provide a solution, that kind of thing. It is an open forum. I'm going to talk you through an example that assumes your project teams are reasonably small. You know, I'd say like 20 people. If you get into very large teams, so if you were here for the MFA project that I was talking about, where we had a core team of 8 people and then like 10 more teams, they all had 20 people each, then you start to cascade into maybe each team having their own lessons learned meeting, and then you have a big group lessons learned meeting. It becomes more complicated, but you can still apply those processes. What we're going to do is just talk about a probably more typical lessons learned, where it's, you know, say 20 people. They don't all have to be on the same team, but the point is for everybody to be supportive. So talking through this example, beforehand, the project manager could set up a shared document for you to use. They would send that out to all the project team members and then ask them to reflect on the questions, which again are, what do we do well and where can we improve? We like to ask a third one too, which is, what are you most proud of? So this is kind of cool because it kind of gives people that feeling of excitement, like, I was proud my idea worked, or I was really proud of our team because they did better than they did last time, or they learned their lessons from last time and I could see the fixes. It's whatever it is. And I think you'll find that most of the times people are proud of other people's work. So it kind of is just a team building thing. It really kind of strengthens the bond between teams. Anyways, those are the two things that are going to be done before. During the meeting, each person could share their response. On a very large team where you have multiple separate teams, again, you might get into just team leads kind of summarizing on behalf of their team. You'll just have to play it by ear. And then as a group, identifying and documenting themes and specific actions to take in the future. And I want to highlight, as a group. So again, it's not just the PM saying, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. It is the team as a group together, identifying those and working together to polish out the entire project, or to really polish out all of your own work. And then after the meeting, this is the part that is one of those documents that 3 people are going to look at for the rest of eternity. They're going to create a lessons learned summary. They might put it as a separate document, and they'll probably include it in the final report so that they can, you know, show that to the sponsor and the steering committee. And they should reference lessons learned before beginning a new similar project. So if you had a database project in the past, you're starting a new database project, take a look at your lessons learned and see, you know, you can already identify those pain points. They might be tiny, or they could be huge. Like, we forgot to tell the database admin that he's part of this project. I mean, that's a really extravagant example, but it's happened. So this is where I'll get into your question, Danny. So the example I'm posting here, or talking about here, really is a meeting active process. You could do it as just a shared document, but I think that hurts the collaboration. You could do a Jamboard or a Padlet like we're doing for this conference where people can just post up and you can have a section. That's one way to go about it. But I really think the live meeting is the healthiest way to do it. And to be honest, the teams that I've been on before moving to the project management role, we always just did them in person as a big circle. We didn't have a document. I mean, somebody was taking minutes or at least notes to identify the specific actions we want to, address. But we didn't do anything beforehand. We just came in like, okay, here's our post. We just finished a big project, and we were doing probably 40 or 50 projects a year. So we were doing this a lot. And it didn't have to be a 3-hour process. It could be a 20-minute process. And that's where the thing where I keep saying the word, when it soaks into who you are and soaks into your team, like it just becomes natural. It's healthy. Nobody's scared to chat out. And it really is just, it's a team building process. So I would suggest together, but again, if you have huge teams, then you do have to start breaking it out and figuring out how to divide the work. And I want to end with this quote for lessons learned, which is the only sure way to have no mistakes, to make no mistakes, is to have no ideas. Again, the point is that it's got to be supportive. You know, that saying that innovation doesn't happen unless you try new things, unless you make mistakes. You can't have successes without failures. It's all of that. Your team shouldn't be scared to make mistakes, but they should be excited about improving their mistakes. They should be excited about trying new things, making mistakes, and then fixing them. That's a good question, Gabe. How do you motivate your team to attend another meeting? I think there you go, food, done. Unless you have the caterers that we have at the county office, and then maybe that's not such a good incentive. I think this is one of those things where when it's a part of how your team works, the first few times are daunting. Especially if you don't have a team with a lot of psychological safety. Make it a part, make it a party, not a part. As you build psychological safety in your team, I think it's not going to be a big deal. I think as your team wants to get better, at least I, as a team member, looked forward to these because I knew it was a time for us to improve. And if you have a highly motivated and high quality team, hopefully they want to improve as well. You'll probably have people that are just, there's nothing you can do. They're going to eye roll every single time. So you'll have to handle those, you people, you're going to have to deal with them on a little bit more direct basis. And maybe calling those folks out, and maybe you can kind of push them into eventually getting the spirit of the whole vibe. But really, I think I have a hard time answering that question, to be honest, because my last team, we had 25 people on the team, and we had extremely good psychological safety. Most people had been there 10 plus years. We had a great environment. And this was part of it. I mean, we got closer as we did this more and more. So that's where I say just doing it is sometimes the way to get it to happen better. Kathy, do you want to talk about your status weekly reports and how you would work this in with lessons learned?
Yeah.
Put you on the spot. I know we didn't plan this.
No worries. I'm from Del Mar School District. We just started doing the project status reports. And when I started implementing on the status reports, I do get my team around to make sure, hey, do we include everything on here so everyone approves what I'm putting out to our assistant superintendent. And in there, I do shout outs. So I will say, so-and-so did, like right now, I'm actually doing Chromebook carts and iPads. So-and-so did 997 Chromebooks, inventoried them in a week's time, like woohoo, type thing. And I just went out real fast to go get some pictures in the back of showing their work, so I can present that to them saying, here we are working. Those pictures end up usually coming into our welcome back for our school. And so people get to see what kind of projects we're doing. I find that when they get the shout outs and when they're included on those weekly status reports on helping to write them or to come together, they get excited. They know what they're doing. They feel like they're part of the whole process of it. And that's what most of my team members are motivated by.
That's awesome. I'm glad I called on you, and I'm glad you spoke up. Thank you for that. I'm actually going to take that. I'm going to take that and incorporate that in because I think that's cool. Just right in that you don't even have to change the way your status reports work. You can still put it in your accomplishments and just attribute a name to it. Be more specific. Instead of we got 900 Chromebooks done, you could say Jerry and Tommy got 900 Chromebooks done, and that could be as simple as that. That's a great point. Very cool. But it kind of reflects just as it soaks into the way your team works. It becomes easy. It becomes natural. Very cool. Anybody else have questions about lessons learned? We have a little extra time in this session. All right, we've answered all of your questions. That's fantastic. We'll move on to celebration. There's not, this isn't complex, it's a celebration. By the way, I want to shout out to Wendell for supporting yet again our sessions. We've got some breakouts happening right after this, so just a heads up, we're going into that. And again, I can't recognize enough how much help it is to have somebody else supporting on the back end while you're presenting. So appreciate it. So the celebration officially closes the project as far as the project team's involved. As we said, the PM's doing other tasks in the background. It's time for the team members to hear about the success of the project and to provide closure. So I'm going to talk you through the example of our unified communications project. That was our rollout of Teams and new phones in 2020. I think we were replacing a PBX that was, I don't know, it's probably almost as old as I am. So moving to an IP-based phone system, moving to a total unified communication system, it was a big project with a ton of teams. So we did an Aloha theme celebration. Since somebody said, I wish we could celebrate in Hawaii, so we did our best. And the way it looked is, it's celebration. It's supposed to be fun. Try not to keep it dry. The final report is for the dry stuff. This is just recognition and love and success, right? Everybody came in wearing Hawaiian stuff. I think Terry Loftus was there. He had the full, he was committed. So just having a little bit of fun with it, being a little corny. If you're doing it in person, it's way easier. It's so hard to celebrate virtually. If you have in-person teams, your celebrations are going to be a lot more fun. In fact, just recently for the Fallbrook HR implementation project that we wrapped up 2 weeks ago, you're going to hear about that tomorrow morning. Perry and I actually just drove up to Fallbrook and just celebrated with them in person. It was a pizza party. It doesn't have to be crazy. But we created going back to the UC project, we created a PowerPoint that included feedback from stakeholders that we captured via survey. So the point is to celebrate, to show that the stakeholders were happy, basically. Now, if your surveys are all doom and gloom, maybe don't bring that into the celebration. But hopefully, if you did your project well, it's all happy. But the point is so that the team members could hear the direct impact on their work had on others, because a lot of times in IT, you're removed from the end users. So the point is to kind of make a little bit of a connection there. Our project sponsor spoke and just said, recognized the value of the project and the teamwork and the outcomes. Each team, since this was a huge project, we acknowledged each team collectively. So, the network team did a great job on planning. The communication did a great job on spinning, putting a fun spin on it. The development team did a great job prepping the software for the phones, that kind of thing. On this one, we did a music guessing game where we played some phone-related songs, some Stevie Wonder, some Blondie, things like that. And then we did a group picture. So it's just celebration, it's love, and then closure. So as a project team member, it's easy. Attend the celebration, hear the high-level recap of the project, share kudos and praise. So it's not just the project manager praising people, it's people praising each other. That's what it's about. And be proud. That one comes easy to me. I'm not shy about being proud of my work and myself, but a lot of people, I think, I'm surprised have a hard time being proud of what they've done. And so be proud of what you've done. That's what a celebration looks like. In fact, I'll say even this conference has been a huge project for us. Our celebration is planned for 4:30 on a Friday at the High Dive Bar on Marina Avenue. So for a small team, your celebration can be that. But really the point is closure. And you don't have to apply this to every project, but we've seen team members seem to have a value in it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be mandatory either, because that is one of the questions, just like the lessons learned. I think the lessons learned should be mandatory. If you're doing it for one person on the team, the whole team should be there. Mandatory celebration, sometimes not so fun, but it depends on your culture and who you've got to work with. That's it for celebration. We've covered that. That's it for closure. That's it for all of project management. Does anybody have any questions from session 1 all the way up to here so far? No questions. Again, we've nailed all the points, so there's nobody's questioning anything. Love that. So we're going to see where we're at, just to see the pretty little check boxes. We've done our lessons learned. We've talked about the stakeholder survey, the final report. We did some more talking about celebration, and then sign off with the sponsor. And that is what a full project typically looks like. Again, you're not necessarily stuck to these rigidly. If a survey doesn't make sense, don't do a survey. If status meetings don't make sense, don't do status meetings, that kind of thing. Just take what will improve your work. And now we're going to go into the breakout activity. Last one of the day. Oh, it's not the last one of the day, so sorry guys, you've got another one later, but it's going to be more fun. It's during game hour. Oh, it's tomorrow. Anyways, we'll go into small groups. We're going to do about 6 people per group again. These are longer breakouts. I think we have 20 minutes till the end of the session, so I'm going to say we're looking at about 14 minutes of breakouts. So that's like literally 2 minutes per person. You don't have to talk much. Discuss the prompt, and then we'll ask you to, some of your teams to share out live. So whoever you pick to share out on your team, you'll be talking live, so be ready. And then I said this last time, I'll say it again. Nobody wants to be the first person to talk. Everybody, just dive in and do it. It's going to be better if you just rip the Band-Aid off and get to talking. It's more fun than staring at each other for 2 or 3 minutes, which has happened on teams that I'm on. So here's your prompt. In your projects, what can you improve? These can be pain points. I mean, like, start it off as a gripe session. We've all got gripes in IT. Let's gripe, but then let's figure out what tools from today can help solve that. If you need to, refer to the map to have a reminder. And then I'd like you to focus on what's one thing you can do to start applying these practices. If you have more things, that's awesome, but at least one actionable item, and we'll call it a success. So if Wendell, you're ready, let's fire it off. And we'll give you guys about a 2-minute warning and about a 30-second warning before we're wrapped up. Anybody want to dive in and just share out what your group discussion was like?
Sure, I can go ahead.
Sure, thank you.
So I mean, we had a number of people in our group that kind of pretty much said that they really liked this whole activity. In school districts, we don't necessarily have defined project managers. A lot of the stuff that we have are, you have a coordinator or director or some other management level saying, hey, guess what? You get to manage projects on top of all this. So there's a lot of that happens. And one of the things that we were just starting to talk about at the end of our conversation was, how do we approach that in places where they don't have those type things? And I was kind of making comments about how this platform can help kind of develop those with the buy-in with the rest of the team. You don't necessarily have to have a full-on PM actually managing these projects. You can have somebody that's well versed with this platform and kind of dive into it. But there was a lot of people that liked just about everything you guys are showing. But I think that the thing that we kind of mentioned a lot more than not was kind of the standing meeting, making sure meetings make sense. Those are kind of important. And I think Matt was talking about how he had a previous boss that literally they had to stand for their meetings. They wouldn't sit down for the whole purpose of making them short. So, but I think we're all kind of on the same page with like the whole thing. I know Ryan had mentioned that he had said that before the execution, it's a good idea to have end users test. That was kind of something that was brought up, but I think everybody's kind of excited and optimistic about using this tool.
Awesome, thank you. I agree. Wearing the many hats, that's one of the biggest challenges. And you can have your schedule, but schedule be damned when your operational work is taken over, So I lived that for a long time. I know what you mean. One other group want to share out for us? I know we're just about out of time. Well, we're pretty much out of time, but go for it. Asim, if I got your name correct.
You got it right. My bandwidth is really weird, so I'm going to keep the video off. I'm in a strange place too. In my group, we talked about maybe using the project charter and getting better at getting sort of sign off on what the project is and getting buy-in, executive buy-in and blessing on the projects, not just having things fly at us and saying yes to everything, and then, for me specifically, the problem was the never ending project that always changes scope because we never had a proper agreement on what we're doing, and we never really handed it over and closed it out, and it never, 5 years later, you have 73 projects and none of them are actually completed, at least in anybody else's mind. One of the tools that I think we all recognize the value of was the after action report, the post-mortems, if you will. Something that we're going to try to do at my organization and try to spread it, and everybody sort of saw the same value. And also the weekly status reports, especially with kudos to those who achieved results, right? So you're using the status report to let people know where you stand, but also who did the work, and then the team gets recognized for their work and their accomplishments and contributions.
That's awesome. Those are all great points. And I about the project charter, I agree that if we had, in certain situations, we could only teach one thing, we teach them the project charter, and that takes care of a lot of the confusion around projects. All right, we're already over time, so I'm not going to drag out. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk, and maybe next conference we'll do a session where it's just all the IT managers and staff get together and complain to each other, because that might be the way to go. Really quickly, I want to just tell you, we have a cheat sheet that kind of covers everything we did today that's aimed at the project team members. So feel free to share this with your teams or use it yourself. It's located here on the EPML website. If you don't grab it right now, we're going to go over these resources later today at the EPMO toolkit session. But you can grab the PDF there. It's just a real high level view of everything we talked about today. Feel free to distribute as much as you want. And last off very quickly, I hope that we achieved our goal today of getting to that middle part where we start to unravel that crazy knot. You guys know what's expected as a project team member and understand the methodology that everybody's following. And with that, we are done. You're done listening to me talk for today anyways. Thanks for following along and playing the game, and hope to see you at the next thing, which I think is the EPMO toolkit, if I know my time. Anyways, guys, don't forget to post your shout outs, your takeaways, your questions over to the bulletin board as well, since we'll be keeping a track of that throughout the conference. And day two sessions are going to be awesome. So if you weren't planning on coming to day two, come to day two. They're going to be way more fun than day one, to be honest, especially with who we have presenting. All right, guys. I'll see you at the next one.